Welcome to Table Talk, the show where business families share candid stories of growth, leadership, and legacy. I'm Matt Knight, Executive Director of the Alberta Business Family Institute, and your host. Today, I'm joined by father-daughter duo who've built something pretty remarkable in Edmonton's business community. Ken Barry is the president of RGO Office Products Edmonton. He moved his family here from Toronto in 1996 to partner with RGO founder Ross Glen, and then build up the Edmonton operations from the ground up. Nearly 30 years later, the operation has grown to 60 employees, serving some of Northern Alberta's largest organizations in the workplace, healthcare, education, and government sectors. Bianca Barry is RGO's Edmonton sales manager, but her history with the company, like a lot of us in family business, started long before she had a job title. She grew up running through RGO's hallways, doing odd jobs over summer breaks, and eventually made the decision to join the business after 4 years with Steelcase in Toronto. Together, they represent a unique family business story, not just a generational transition within one company, but a family that has grown a branch of a family business in the Edmonton marketplace. On the other side of the highway, the Calgary side of RGO is also navigating a business transition at the same time, but at different stages, going from the second to third generation. Ken and Bianca, welcome to Table Talk.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
So Ken, we'll jump right into it. So tell us a little bit about how RGO Edmonton came to be. So I understand, you're kind of at Steelcase Canada and kind of a corporate role in Toronto, and then all of a sudden, RGO Edmonton partner.
How did that happen?
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah.
Well, basically, I started in the industry 12 years before I started RGO Edmonton.
Okay.
And I had worked for what would be the equivalent of RGO in Ontario when I was in my early 20s. And I spent about 5 or 6 years there learning the industry and rather liked it. I like the creative side of it. I like the products that we were providing, like the kind of people we got to work with. And at some point, I forget how it actually happened, but I transitioned from the dealer, which was POI, to Steelcase, which is the manufacturer. And they at the time had a very large plant and manufacturing facility there. And so I got to see that part of the business. And about 4 years into that, I started getting some entrepreneurial pangs and looked around and thought I could probably do this. And I was actually approached by a gentleman who was looking to transition out of his business in the industry and said, would you be interested? And that opportunity didn't come to fruition, but we looked hard at it. And then, serendipitously, the opportunity in Edmonton sort of presented itself. And in my previous role with Steelcase, I had the opportunity to travel right across the country and deal with all kinds of, all the dealers really, representing Steelcase, but pursuing financial institutions. So I was the bank guy.
Okay.
And so dealers always like seeing me come into town because that meant, Ken's bringing some business and stuff's going on with the banks.
Yeah.
And so I'd been through Edmonton and I realized there was a transition happening here. And one of the guys I'd worked with for a number of years, he was trying to talk me into moving from Toronto to Vancouver, but still to work with Steelcase. And I thought, well, I'm not going to take a lateral move like that. But I said, what are you going to do in Edmonton? And it hadn't been posted. It hadn't been sort of vetted out yet. And he said, oh, would you be interested in that? I'm like, yeah, for sure I'd be interested in that. So we pursued it and went through the qualifications that were required with Steelcase. And towards the end of that whole process, they said, you know what? You might want to talk to Ross out of Calgary because he's interested as well, but we want somebody local, entrepreneurial, and vested in the community. But there might be an opportunity for both of you. And so I said, sure, we'll chat. And we worked out that, yeah, it made sense for me to be the sweat equity, the local entity that would actually run the business.
Mm-hmm.
And I also realized that it was better to be able to use a brand and a name in RGO that would be recognized in the province. And then he was the finance part of it. And we had a handshake deal, and away we went.
Wow. So pretty kind of informal in those early days, and just kind of working on building out the market and the branch together.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. It was very, we made things a little more official as we got into it.
Yeah.
But basically he was the money behind the operation. And it took a lot of the risk off the table for me in that sense. But yeah, I was still starting from nothing. So.
Yep. And I maybe should have thought about this before the podcast, but is RGO then Ross Glen office?
That's a good question. It comes up quite a bit.
Okay.
Ross, when he started in 66,
Mm-hmm.
he had a partner named Gord Oliver.
Okay.
So it was RGGO, and they decided to just go with RGO.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. That was, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a trivia question at our all staffs all the time.
I can imagine. And Bianca, so you were kind of born into this.
Yeah.
What do you remember about kind of the early days of your dad's entrepreneurial ventures?
Yeah, I don't really remember a lot. I think both of my parents were really good at, ensuring that our family was strong and very available. So all my memories are happy ones, which are running around RGO as a little kid, chasing my brother around the hallways. And my dad would set up races with the two of us to see who could do a lap of RGO first. So I remember that. I have, core photos in my mind of, when RGO was being built, and my brother was 1 at the time and I was 3. So pretty young, young memories for us. But I think it was really just the excitement and the anticipation of this new life in Alberta that both my parents worked really hard for in those early days. So.
Yeah, no, and that would have been a big move for any family to kind of go from Toronto to Edmonton, like very different cities. And
yeah, I always say, I was pretty young when we started, but I was also blissfully unaware of just, the size of the move. But yeah, I'd bring the kids to the office on the weekends and give my wife a break and, set up things for them to do while I was trying to catch up on stuff. So. That was the start of it. We also do have some very interesting photos of Bianca through the years in RGO.
Yeah, I had many different roles in in my childhood years, and whether that be like receptionist or my dad employed my brother and I one summer as janitors. He called it the sanitary engineer, and so I think he actually even wrote out a job description for my brother and I. And I signed on right away. My brother was like 12 at the time and was a little skeptical of the early wake up times. But we both showed up. We both did it, and it was fun.
Yes. So as we talked about in the intro, so it's been 30 years now in your chapter of RGO Edmonton. Is kind of what you built versus what you imagined when you first signed on. How do those two kind of compare to each other?
Interesting. I guess my point of reference was primarily what I'd been involved with in Toronto. And I knew the markets were very different. I also had the good fortune to see all kinds of dealers right across the country. So I kind of had that in the back of my mind as well. And I would have to say, like when we started, I always tried to position with any new staff that we were different. And anybody that might have some industry experience, that's good, but that wasn't the basis on which I wanted people to sort of think or work around. I always said, we're going to do 3 things really well. Provide service, bring some knowledge to the marketplace, and represent excellent products. Mm-hmm. And I said, if you think about it, the product side is the easy part.
Yep.
We represent some great manufacturers. We don't produce anything. We are a service entity. And I think people understood that, bought into it. We have access to a lot of information, knowledge, insights, and that's the stuff we needed to share and work with our clients, work with the influencers like architects and designers, and let them know what we were about and what the information that we had that was available.
Yeah.
But, you know, a lot of people don't spend that time until they're in the throes of a project. Whereas, you know, this is our 9 to 5, so we better be really, really good at it.
Yeah, you're able to,
So-
you know, that knowledge of having gone through those cycles.
Yes.
Bring a lot to the
Many, many times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So Bianca, we'll shift gears a little bit here. So kind of from that first or maybe third role as a sanitary engineer, at one point you decided, you know, maybe I don't want to do just sanitary engineering for my life. And you went to the University of Alberta. You were in, I think, our strategic management major. Was kind of joining the family business always the plan, or were you unsure?
Yeah, you know, I think I was definitely unsure. I grew up, you know, in high school and in my elementary years, not really wanting to pursue business. I didn't quite understand it. And maybe it was naive as a child saying, oh, I'm going to do something different, right? And I actually really wanted to become a psychologist from having no really understanding of what a psychologist does. So I entered the U of A with a psychology major, and quickly found out, you know, how much bio was involved in that. So I said, oh, that's probably not for me, and decided to shift gears into business. And I really do think that was one of the best decisions that I ever made for my education, because I think I found a program that I was really aligned with and that pushed me out of my shell, allowed me to gain confidence in a lot of different, you know, arenas and areas, and joined student clubs, did all the, you know, the case competitions that it has to offer, and really gave me this amazing experience. And so as I was, you know, building my sense of self, I would say, and confidence throughout university, I also started thinking about, like, why wouldn't I want to join RGO? That's actually, you know, such a great opportunity, and for so many reasons, and I definitely wanted to give it a shot. So I was very lucky that my dad, both my parents, never pressured me into seeing RGO as a, you know, natural next step for me, and it just became something that I wanted to explore. And so I was doing my last semester abroad, actually, in Spain. And it was amazing, and trying to figure out what I wanted to do after I graduated. And I think I had, you know, talked to my parents about the opportunity at RGO, but I really wanted to get some experience outside of it first. So my dad sent me an application for Steelcase, which is where he started. And that's kind of what got the ball rolling. And I applied and got myself a position back in Toronto, actually, supporting the dealer that my dad was at back in the day, POI. So it was like a full circle moment. And I spent 4 years there gaining experience and really loving it, and had some great mentors and supporters there, and both at Steelcase and POI. And then when the pandemic happened, I missed home a lot, and I called my dad. I remember being on King Street and was like, so like, is there a position open? And he said he thought he could open one up. So so in early 2021, I came back.
Yes. And so was that, and this can be for either one of you, but was kind of that, you know, starting in the career, you know, kind of in an adjacent branch, intentional? Was it thought out of, let's get you close to the business, but not in the business? What kind of, you know, drove that decision?
I think it was intentional for me. I wanted to, you know, gain credibility and experience while still being, you know, learning about the industry and what my dad does without being at RGO right away. So for me, it allowed me to, you know, objectively look at the industry as a whole and see if I enjoy it, and see, you know, how much I can learn and pick up before joining RGO. So I think it was great for a couple of reasons. I got to learn about our main manufacturer, and I got to meet a lot of people there.
Yep.
And I had a lot of support from them from the very beginning, and then allowed me to feel ready and comfortable to come to RGO.
Yeah, and I would say it certainly wasn't intentional. I didn't have a master plan, but I did think, wow, this could really be very, very beneficial to cut your teeth, see what this industry is about, decide if you really even liked it. Also get a taste for, bigger markets and see things on a different scale than just, through the lens of RGO. And I think that did give you a ton of credibility when you did come back, right? So, and it was just interesting, the irony of her working basically with a lot of the same people that I had worked with so many years before. And the calls I got that year were pretty funny because people were like, oh my God, I remember when she was born. I was like, I know, yeah.
I remember one of the VPs of Steelcase came up to me on one of my first days and said, you probably don't even know me, but I bought you your first baby shoes. And I thought, whoa. I was like, this is crazy. Steelcase executives are, that's pretty awesome. And I think the part that, hasn't been mentioned is my parents also met at POI.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So not only are they very familiar with my dad, but they know my mom, Magdalena, really well. So we spent a lot of summers going back to Toronto, and my parents would actually drive us around POI and introduce the story of how they met. So the first day I went to POI, people were trying to give me directions, and I said, I'm very familiar with the outside of POI. So
how to get there.
Yeah. So it was kind of cool.
So you and your wife met in the industry.
Yes.
Both worked together. What was her role in kind of the RGO story?
Well, she, at that time, I call it her first career. She was a graduate from Ryerson, and she had a degree in design.
Okay.
And unbeknownst to me, she was introduced to me by a coworker at Steelcase. Her area of specialty was retail and restaurant design. But she was designing an office, a big office for a contractor. And it was just funny because we had to meet after 5. And I said, oh, okay, sure. So did all that. And turns out the job she was doing was for her brother's business. And anyway, got the order and did the furnishings for it was a Black & McDonald facility. Okay. But my wife got very exposed to Steelcase, and she had been aware of Steelcase from her schooling because they did a field trip to the plant, and so she was very comfortable with that. And we had talked about it when the first opportunity came up to do something for ourselves. And I think, she was very supportive of that. And I think, there was probably a fair bit of naivety there as well. We said, you know what? Let's go to Edmonton. We can, this is a great opportunity. It's only 3.5 hours by plane. And our in-laws, my in-laws were a little choked for sure. But my wife was supportive right from day one, and she embraced it. She ended up going back to school to get her degree in education. And then she taught for 10 years. And now she's a photographer doing specialty photography work. So it's pretty cool.
Okay, cool. No, I just wasn't sure if she was involved or what level she was in.
Yeah, she never got involved in the day-to-day. But has been there from day one. Yeah.
Yeah, and I will say that everybody's very familiar with my mom at work, and she makes an amazing effort to know everybody and say hi. And her photography studio is also at RGO. So, so she's in the office often.
Okay. And then what was it? So kind of 2 parts to this question. What was it like for you coming to RGO and working with your dad for the first time? And then kind of the second part of that is how long do you think it would have taken if it wasn't for the pandemic?
That's actually a really good question. Okay, so the first part of your question, it was very surreal coming back to RGO. It was very exciting. I was also, I would say, naive, thinking, how hard could it be?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it turns out the dealer world is a lot different than the manufacturer side.
Okay.
And so I would say it took me about a full year of trying to figure things out, understanding what the process is, and how to get business. I could speak all the the research and the knowledge, and I could have those conversations with clients, but there's a different art of understanding the community you're in, who is looking for space, and how we can help. So but I think my dad was really supportive from the very beginning. A couple things that really stand out for me is when I came, there was an envelope on my desk with, I've always been a very type A person. And so whenever I came to RGO as a child, I would make notes as if I was working. So I don't know, there was just gibberish, but I would just, write down calls that never happened, or take notes for my dad. And I guess he kept all those notes. And so I was in an envelope for me on my desk, which was very sweet. And then he also set up calls for me with different women leaders in Edmonton who had either started their own business or who had worked for their family. So Angela Santiago from Little Potato Company was one of them. Nicole Jansen from Alta ML was another one. And it was just a really nice effort, because I think he understood that this was a really big change for me, and also a little bit intimidating in terms of what the future could hold. Mm-hmm. And then your second part of the question, if the pandemic hadn't happened, no, I don't think it would have happened this quick. I think I was in Toronto in my, early to mid 20s, really loving that city life. And I was kind of caught up in maybe advancing at Steelcase a little bit, maybe trying a different market, seeing where that could go. But I'm really grateful for the pandemic, because I think in my heart of hearts, I really value my family and my community and my friends. And Edmonton has always really felt like home for me. So I was just in Toronto a couple of weeks ago, and I love that city so much. But whenever I'm coming home, I feel a very grounded sense of peace about it. So I think it was the right decision.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And then, so Ken, when Bianca came back, how did you have to adjust to kind of, welcome her or bring her into the company? Did you, the role that you had for her, was it an opening? Was there a little bit of? It was
a sales role. So we put her to work. And I'm happy to say we've got a very, very strong management team. And I think everybody realized, wow, she's going to have experiences and knowledge that we just don't get exposed to all the time. So I think that was very well received. And she came in with, her own ideas, and I realized, okay, I don't need to, tell her what to do day by day. I was hoping there'd be some fresh ideas, some new experiences that she could share. And I didn't want to sort of cloud her ability to share that. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I was, worried about for about 2 days was, okay, I hope she achieves credibility with her coworkers. Yeah. And that happened very quickly. People realized, wow, okay, she knows her stuff. She's got a lot to offer, and we're lucky to have her.
Yes. So let's switch gears a little bit. So there's kind of two families, two transitions in this RGO story. Right. So, and this is it took me a while to kind of think through how to frame this, because it's not something I've looked at either academically or with families or on this podcast. So, kind of the RGO origin story, we heard a little bit about mm-hmm. Glen and him starting it. They're now kind of transitioning into the third generation.
Right.
So so this family business is a little bit different. But how did, you didn't inherit the company per se, you kind of came in to build mm-hmm. a branch of it. When did you start thinking of it as kind of a Barrie family business opposed to a branch? And how did that kind of identity start to shift for you?
Well, for me, I always thought of it as a separate entity. You know, and legally we're a separate entity. But I kind of position it in my head that, you know, we can take all of the good that exists there and leverage all of that and then build our own version of it. I was probably naive at the beginning in a lot of ways. But one, I didn't believe that, you know, two markets, Calgary and Edmonton in the same province, could be so different. Yeah. You know, coming in, I thought, okay, you know, it's got to be pretty similar. But as we all know, yeah, there's just nuances and for lots of reasons, they are different. So we couldn't just replicate the style, approach, and business model that existed in Calgary. It had to be, you know, customized to what the Edmonton market needed, and that's what we did. So for me, yeah, it's always been a different business that has the same name. We wanted clients to see us as one provincial entity, which I think most people do, and but you know, under Kathy's leadership in Calgary, we've collaborated a lot more on things like the marketing, the branding, our IT and HR supports that we share. So it's made a lot more sense more in the last 10 years than it did in the first 20.
Interesting. Okay. And we'll touch on that a little bit. So Kathy was or is the president of RGO Calgary.
Correct. Yeah.
So she was second generation. So she would have been Glen's daughter. And then her two daughters now are also involved with RGO in Calgary.
She's got a daughter and a niece.
A daughter and a niece. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so kind of, you know, they're going through that chapter of kind of second to third. And again, I don't know ages, I don't know roles. And then, you know, you're the two of you are busy working at RGO in Edmonton. How do those two transitions parallel each other? How are they fundamentally different? So we're talking first to second and second to third.
Well, I know you've had some conversations with Sarah and Cassandra.
Yeah, I think so. Sarah and Cassandra. Sarah is Kathy's daughter. Cassandra is Kathy's niece. Both very involved in the business, from what I understand, and they're both around my age, which is, I think, pretty interesting. So they've both been super welcoming and, you know, great to have conversations with in terms of the business. I think the reality is all three of us would be pretty early on in that journey of any sort of transition or thought of that. So there hasn't been anything, you know, concrete or anything like that, but they've just been really nice to talk to. And Kathy was actually one of the first who invited me to Calgary to have lunch with them, as like all ladies, actually. It was Kathy and her daughter, niece, and myself, and we just got to talk about, you know, what it's like working in the family business. And she, you know, had also the experience of working with her dad, Ross Glen, and so she got to share her own experience as that second gen, you know, from my point of view.
Yeah. And
then I think it probably has some subtle differences for Cassandra and Sarah. I can't speak to that, but it was pretty cool for them because they got to go to work for a long time with both their grandpa and either their mom or their aunt in the office at the same time. And Ross was in the Calgary office until 2 weeks before he passed. So he loved that. He loved RGO and it was home for him. And I think it created a special bond for them too.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. And then to kind of talk a little bit about, so you mentioned, so Ross Glen passed away, I believe it was about a year ago.
Yes.
But involved till kind of the very end. As that founder, he was obviously probably pretty big force in the business for decades. What did that loss, mean to you personally, Ken? You lost a business partner, a mentor, a friend, probably. How did that, kind of impact both you personally, but also what did it do to the business, and how did you work through that?
Yeah, the business side, it was easier. because I used to say, here's what I'm doing, here's the plan. And he'd offer his critique of it. And oftentimes we didn't always agree.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, well, if you want to come up here and you want to do it, we'll do it your way. He'd go, and he'd respond, so I'm not coming up there. So I said, okay, you can tell me I screwed this up later if that's what happens, but this is what I'm doing. And so he was very supportive and just, let me make my mistakes and do what I was doing up here. But from that standpoint, he wasn't involved at any point really in the day-to-day. So it was easier to carry on. It was a big loss as a friend, as a mentor. He, just had a swagger about him and a style that I think everybody recognized. Most people loved. And he was a bit of a cowboy. And that's when I realized too that, there's a fit that he had in the Calgary market, and there was a fit that I had in the Edmonton market, and they were very complementary, but you couldn't drop one into the other and expect the same sort of results.
Mm-hmm.
And I know in the last 15 years, his fingerprints, while still there, he had handed things over to his daughter and then the team that he had, and he was involved because he just wanted to be, because he did love it.
Yep.
And it was it was who he was. It wasn't just a part of him. And I've tried to say to Bianca as well that this is a business. Very proud of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not our family.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's not that integrated into the fiber. It may be in years to come, but that's the way I choose to look at it.
Yeah. So that kind of leads me to another question. So you both have had very different experiences. But both kind of started from that Steelcase into RGO. In different forms.
Yeah.
One as kind of the entrepreneur founder. The other is second gen. Trying to find their way and working through it. Who had it harder? Who had it easier?
Go ahead.
No, I think it's too hard to compare it that way. I think I'll never know the stress and risk that it takes to start a business. Both my parents put it all on the line to start this up, and obviously had an amazing partnership in Calgary, but it doesn't negate the fact that they, brought their entire life to Edmonton away from their family and friends. And so that's not something I know. And to be honest, I did the opposite. I was in Toronto and said, actually, I want to come back to my friends and family. Mm-hmm. So I think in that way, my parents definitely would have had it harder. I think there is something to be said about joining a business when there's more to lose, in terms of it's bigger and it's more established. So where my dad started RGO at 34, I believe, I'm approaching that age now, and I think, oof, that's a lot of responsibility to inherit at what feels like, the beginning of my career, even though I have been in the industry for 10 years, but having 60 employees is a little bit different than 5.
Yeah, than starting up.
Yeah.
So, and it is very different. When I was starting, I at least was confident that I knew as much as anybody else that I was going to be working with within the industry, and maybe a little bit more, and had some different experiences that would be of value. But and I didn't want anybody to know this at the time, but I had never managed people before. And I was like, oh, how's that going to work? And so that was the hard part. But I also thought for Bianca coming back, it was that credibility piece. It was the, I don't want to say the need, but probably the feeling to, okay, I got to work harder and prove to everybody that I'm not just here because, it's a family business. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I never experienced that. But I did experience times where, clients would walk into our office and there was a gentleman who was taller and a little bit older than me, and they thought he must be running the place. And they said, no, Ken's actually in charge. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so switch things up a little bit. This is what we call our lightning round. So we got a couple kind of 3 to 5 questions, really fast. Don't think too much about it. Either of you could, I'll either direct it to one of you or both jump in. So first one, hardest part about working with family?
Knowing when to just leave it at the office.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
You can't agree. What's your own?
I can't agree. I can't agree.
I just made that up.
Okay, I love it. I can't agree. The hardest part is probably the responsibility that you feel.
Okay. Best business advice, either from kind of the generation before you or your mentor, or from someone not in the business that you've ever had?
I wouldn't necessarily say that this was something that, my dad always, told me, but I've witnessed how having a calm presence and a calm state of mind helps you work through anything.
Yeah, and the old adage, treat people like you would want to be treated, and then try to understand really, especially with clients, how do they need to be treated?
Yeah,
and leveraging those differences.
Okay. Weirdest or most memorable workspace you've had to design or be a part of?
Yeah, it's been all kinds of things. We furnished the Edmonton remand.
Okay.
Think of that. Yeah. So went in there. That was interesting. And then one of the others, we were doing a job in the West End somewhere. I can't remember exactly where it was, but we were supplying stainless steel products, because this is where the province takes roadkill to assess, any disease or any issues they might have. And I never really had thought that there might be a facility for that, but okay.
For me, I'm not really sure. I think I loved working on the Little Potato Company space. That was really cool. Mm-hmm. And in my time in Toronto, I got to work a little bit on the Google offices, so that was really neat.
Nice. Mm-hmm. And if RGO didn't exist, what do you think you'd be doing right now?
I'd be a retired NHL hockey player, but
yeah. As all boys say, yeah. Myself, I think I would probably be in either a different sales role or maybe something to do with organizational change, project management, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So shifting a little bit on kind of what the future of workplaces look like. So a little bit away from the family business topic. But Bianca, I found, so you've been involved a little bit with something called the Work Better Lab in the Pandemic Dentist Building. So kind of like a concept space of what future work could look like. What's kind of the thinking behind that? What have you learned, and what can you tell us about it? What does the future of workplaces look like?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a pop-up space that we did in partnership with Steelcase, and we rented out the Pendennis space for it. And I think we've seen a major shift in the workplace since COVID, especially in just the way that we collaborate and the way that people request spaces that they need to focus in. I think before the pandemic, there was a big push towards, I would say, bench style applications where everybody was working at, that communal kitchen table. Mm-hmm. And while that was fun, what people really liked about working from home was their ability to focus and concentrate. Yep. For the most part, if they were lucky enough to have a space that, they could close a door in. But what they missed was that connection to people. So I think finding that balance of collaboration spaces while still giving people a space to focus and get their work done in the office has shifted. People really want an equitable experience at work, but they also want an experience that mimics their favorite coffee shop or their, living room at home. Mm-hmm. So that balance between both is really critical. And what we've been saying for a long time is that your experience at work has to be better than the experience you can get at a third-party location. And it has to be worth the commute for people to come in. And so we've been trying to show the different applications and the different tools that you can, employ your people with to get their best work done at work.
Okay. Anything to add to that, Ken?
No. Well, yes, a little bit in that we've always said that, our belief is that your physical space matters. And we think people underestimate that, and people haven't really focused on it a lot in the especially as it relates to the workplace. And yet, every organization's biggest expense is their people. So, our job is to help leverage that physical space. And that has just evolved to what Bianca was referencing, where, that space has to be better.
Yep.
It has to provide an ROI for the management of the organization, but it also has to be a space that people want to be in. And we love doing beautiful, spaces that are very elegant and everything, but every space should be customized to what the organization does, what they believe, and how they work. And if you do that right, people will want to be there.
Yep, nice, makes sense. So how do you see, there's lots of changes these days with AI and technology and different forms of innovation. How do you see that in both workplace design overall and then also just at RGO?
I think we see that in really a shift towards agile spaces. And I think we started seeing that even just at the pre-pandemic years of 2019, 2020, we started learning about how having agile spaces that can adapt to the work that you're doing on the fly is so critical. So something as simple as having, whiteboards everywhere. Of course, technology is amazing, but having that analog capability of just huddling together, writing your ideas down, having things on wheels so that you can cluster together as you need or break apart when you need to focus. Really that flexible, agile space is key to that. And like I said in the beginning also is having equitable spaces. So no matter if you are hybrid or at home, joining for a call from a different location or in the office, you still feel just as a part of the team. You can collaborate with your teammates just as easily as you could face to face.
And then, Ken, what do you see RGO looking like in 10 years?
In 10 years.
Or 5 years.
It's interesting because we will follow, where technology goes, where the workplace goes. I believe there will always be a requirement for offices, for workplaces. I think people will always be the key element of most organizations anyway, regardless of what happens with AI and other technologies. But exactly how that looks, it's hard to say. And I think that's the exciting part because the solutions and the products we're selling now, a lot of them didn't even exist 7-8 years ago. Like these are new applications. There's new ways of responding to what those requirements are. And I think that's going to continue. And I think the challenge for the RGOs of the world would be, stay involved with the industry, but also the manufacturers that are on the leading edge of that so that we're still relevant. And as I say, I believe there will always be a need. But yeah, I think, the solutions, the applications and the products, they're going to be very different.
Yeah. Okay. So Ken, you've been building, RGO Edmonton for 30 years. It's people often get people not uncomfortable, but whenever I ask them about what their legacy is or what they want their legacy to be, they're always like, "Well, I'm not dead."
Yeah,
but
that's true.
What do you think you want your legacy to be? What do you think you want the Barry family legacy to be in relation to RGO? What comes to mind?
Interesting question. Because and I guess like most entrepreneurs, you don't spend a lot of time just pondering that. But I would like to think, hey, we're a people organization, and we've put people first, and we treated people well. I think that's part of the legacy. And while we took our profession and our responsibilities seriously, I also think it's important that you have some fun while you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then a big part of that is also, giving back and being part of the community, being engaged and supportive of the things that, need some time and attention. And there's lots of them, as we all know.
Yeah.
So.
So there's a couple books and some things that actually say, the best thing to do to understand your legacy is to ask one of your kids. So Bianca,
over to you.
what do you think, to put you on the spot, what do you think your dad's legacy is? What do you think he's done at RGO that is not remarkable? I can't find the right word there, but what brings you kind of joy or aspiration, and what do you think that is, and what do you want to do to take that to the next level?
Oh, yeah.
Big question again.
That is a big question. I think, I agree with everything he said in terms of, having a people first organization. And I think that the word that came to mind as I was listening to that was just the level of care that I think my dad has for the people at RGO and for our clients and for the community. I think that, if people look back at Ken's legacy, I would say that it's very apparent that he cares about all three, and he has a big sense of responsibility to the people that work for RGO and the people that we serve in our community and our clients. And so I think that will live on through the years. And I think that that's also made RGO a great place to work. And people align with that vision and that drive as well. So yeah, me especially.
Yeah.
And sorry, what was the second part of your?
What do you want your impact to be in the next chapter?
Oh my gosh, my impact. Well, I think I get excited about the growth that RGO as a whole can have. I think we're in a really good position in Alberta, and I think that there's a lot of potential there to continue to grow our influence and our people. I think we're in an interesting point in our history, at least in Edmonton, and I would say probably starting in Calgary too, where a lot of our workforce has been with RGO under 5 years. So we're turning over now, where we've had quite a few retirements and people with a lot of experience, and so we are training the next generation right now, and I think that that's a huge opportunity to create a new maybe not new culture, but just a new stamp on what RGO is and what we can achieve with it. So I'm excited about that.
Yes. And then for other, families or business families or students that are listening to this, what advice would you have to them about, joining a business or starting a business in partnership with a family business? What would you point them towards? How would you guide them?
Well, I think from my standpoint, I think you have the harder part of that of I haven't started a business, but for me, I think what I did in university and what I've tried to do at RGO is just say yes to opportunities. I think that there's so many things you can get involved in and so many things that you can get experience in through your university days or early on in your career. I've really tried hard not to let the imposter syndrome or any insecurities say no. So I might as well just jump in and give it a go. What's the worst that can happen? And I think that that's the attitude I have at RGO is, I may not have all the answers. I may not know what the future holds, but I know I'm gaining great experience and I know that this will take me to the right spot in life. And so I would say that's my key advice.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, I agree with all that. And I really like, from your generation's perspective, the sense that, learning is a lifelong process. And that's a little different than when I was coming up. Sometimes maybe it was just my perception, but you got pigeonholed into that's what you do and that's what we do and that's what they do. Yeah. But you can learn from everybody, and you don't need to have all the answers. And I know, when I started, I was fortunate enough to get exposed to things like the Young Entrepreneurs Organization, and the Chamber of Commerce, and just there's groups out there that you can learn so much from, that you don't have to enter, a business with all the answers. And now it's funny. I remember I used to go to my EO forum group and go, wow, this is where I'm going to ask all the questions that my staff think I already know the answers to, but I have no clue. Because you couldn't ask your staff, and so those, and it's changed. I know there's different groups out there now, but there's lots of places where you can continuously learn and, I guess grow into the role. So don't be hesitant because it seems too daunting. There's lots that can be learned on the fly.
Yep. Nice. Okay. And then kind of my wrap-up question is typically, always looking for, for those next generation leaders, for other people in businesses, or other people wanting to start a business. What book would you recommend to them and why? Or what book has made the most impact to you in your journey?
Well, most recently, I would say there's a book called Traction.
Yep.
Are you familiar with it?
Yep.
Yeah. And by Gino Wickman. And it, for me, was very transformative in terms of, okay, there is a system, there is a process that I can put in place for my business.
Yep. And
it's been hugely beneficial. We've been using it and on the EOS journey for almost 10 years now.
Okay. That's a good recommendation. And great methodology.
Yeah.
For me, I would say most recently, I really liked the Difficult Conversations book. For me in my journey, as I'm a growing leader, I think that has been one of the hardest challenges or learning curves. So kind of learning how to voice your opinions and how to have a different perspective from people has been really important, and that book helped a lot.
Awesome. Well, thank you both very much for joining me today. Thank you for those recommendations and for sharing your experiences and your family business story with us. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt.
Super, Matt. It's been a pleasure.
Ken and Bianca, thank you both so much for sitting down with me today and sharing your stories. What stands out most to me is the idea that a family business doesn't always look the way people expect. The Barry family didn't inherit RGO, but Ken moved to Edmonton 30 years ago to help build a branch of RGO from the ground up. What makes this story especially rich is that it's happening alongside a transition within RGO Calgary. That sentence we don't need. No, we do. And what makes this story especially interesting is that it's happening alongside a transition of RGO in Calgary. Two families, two different stages, both navigating generational transitions under one roof and learning from each other in real time. That's something you don't hear about often enough, and not a story we've had on this podcast before. If you've enjoyed this episode, follow Table Talk to stay up to date on new episodes. You can reach out to me at matt.knight@ualberta.ca, follow us on LinkedIn, or visit abfi.ca to learn more about ABFI and the University of Alberta. To learn more about RGO, visit rgo.ca.